Hello, and a very warm welcome to today's exciting launch of the Diversity Project's gold standard best practice for employers that want to support employees in combining family and their career. It's such an important topic. It's one that actually I firmly believe holds the key to really future-proofing the investment and savings industry. And of course, it's a national societal issue. There are 13 million working parents in the UK, and obviously enabling both men and women to combine family life with a career is a vital societal issue. And it's something that, of course, has become more pressing, more acute as an issue as a result of the pandemic and lockdown policies. A recent survey has suggested that more women are now not returning to work after having a baby for the first time, like forever, since they started monitoring that. And also suggests that escalating childcare costs and an increasing scarcity of access to childcare means that many women, up to 40%, have either left their jobs or seriously considering leaving their jobs or reducing their working hours. Now, the Diversity Project, we firmly believe that childcare and other responsibilities around family life belong to families, not just to women. Of course, couples have children and bring up children. And we won't believe gender balance in key roles at our firms until and unless we improve gender equality in the home. Now, the Working Families workstream, which is led brilliantly by Claire Black and Sasha Kalistan, is there to raise awareness across the industry, to also encourage employers to adopt policies, practical policies that will support those who have both family and a desire to forge a great career in the industry. Now, we should understand as investors, we should understand more than most that actually taking steps, taking interventions that might have a price tag attached is an investment rather than a cost. Now, today you're going to hear some personal stories, some lived experiences, as well as some expertise in a more sort of consulting way around some great examples of good practice that's already being adopted. And as I read a final version of the guide that we're putting out today, I couldn't help but think how, on one level at least, the recommendations are very simple. I was reminded of a conversation I had with some representatives from Aviva when I was writing up a case study around them putting in place what I think is the very first equal paid parental leave for both men and women, however they become a parent. They put that in place in 2017. And I asked why. I mean, this was something that was out of step with the industry at the time. It was quite radical. In theory, it had quite a big cost. And I asked, and the answer came back, because we recognize that employees with a great family life are going to be happier. And we want happy, engaged employees who will focus as well on their career. So that just makes perfect sense to me. I hope today's discussion and the guide itself will help you and your firm feel ready to take this and other steps like the equal paid parental leave to support those who, like most human beings, want to have a happy family life as well as success at work. And to chair our brilliant lineup of panelists, I'd now like to turn over to Claire Hodgson. Claire is director of How Do You Do It? It's an organisation that's been established very precisely to help people and companies combine work and family to great success. And Claire has been working with the Diversity Project and with our Working Families workstream to help us understand best practice, including from other sectors. So I'm very grateful to you, Claire. Over to you.
Thank you, Helena, and thank you for that wonderful introduction and highlighting why the topic of supporting working families is one that we continue to need to focus on as an industry. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you quickly to the panel, and we'll have more chance to talk to them as we go through. So we have joining us today an amazing range of experience to share with you. Firstly, Stephanie Kelly, who's Head of Thematic Research from Red Wheel, and Stephanie will be looking at some of the data that she has researched in terms of why supporting working families is a beneficial thing to do. And Claire is joining us as co-chair of the Working Families workstream and will be sharing with you some more information about the Working Families Guide. And then Nikki Cullen, who's Diversity and Inclusion Senior Manager from Fidelity International, who'll be sharing their experience of supporting working families and the positive steps they've been taken in this area. And then Dimple Mistry, who's Head of Human Resources at GIC, is also co-chair of the Race and Ethnicity Workstream and a steering group member. And Dimple will also be sharing the experience of what they've undertaken at GIC in terms of best supporting their working families. And then finally, last but not least, Jonathan Waeland, private banker from Julius Baer. And Jonathan, I believe, was one of the first individuals to take extended paternity leave in his organisation, and is going to be sharing an individual perspective on that. So thank you. So the aim of our webinar today is really to discuss 3 areas: to consider why support for working families continues to be important, to launch the Working Families Best Practice Guide, to show you the key recommendations within it and our ask of member firms. And then most importantly, to share experience of the good practice that's already happening within the industry. This isn't about starting from ground zero. There's a lot of really good work that's already out there, and we're going to be highlighting some of that today. But first of all, I'd like to come to you, Stephanie. I'd really be interested to hear about what your research undertaken both at Red Wheel and at Aberdeen has highlighted about why supporting working families is so important. So
sure,
Stephanie,
yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I did this work when I was at Aberdeen with a great group of researchers. And really, I think a lot of the conversations about gender equality in the workforce and even in our industry start with a very kind of ethical or moral place. I think that's useful. I think, I totally believe in the ethics of gender equality, but actually, in terms of particularly the industry we work in, there's a really strong efficiency, human capital maximization, labor supply maximization argument that really gets to some of the key issues that as investors and people working in the wider industry, we talk about all the time. What are the challenges of an aging workforce? What are the challenges of long-term low growth? How do we boost potential growth? How do we boost potential profitability? How do we make the most of our workforce? And for me, gender equality is so clearly an important part of that conversation. And so when we started the research, that was really the focus. It was really about saying, I started as an economist, this is an economics argument. This isn't even a moral, it doesn't need to be. It may well have a place in a moral conversation as well, but it's actually a really important business conversation to have. And so what we did was just try to say, let's take it back a step. Across OECD countries, women are on average actually more educated than men across all but kind of 5 OECD countries. So it's not as though women aren't well qualified, they're very well qualified, overqualified actually, if you look at what ends up happening. Because what you then see is that labor force participation, women showing up in the workforce, tends to actually be much weaker than their male counterparts. And that gets worse, particularly after having children. So it's very visible across many OECD countries that it's after having children in particular that women fall out of the workforce. Also, the gender pay gap, which is very related. Again, a lot of the research suggests that it's related again to women stepping back from the workforce or coming back, but in more of a part-time or lower responsibility role in order to facilitate this kind of work care trade-off that we know women face, that men do not face in the same way on average. And so we really started our research by saying, well, what drives participation? What will boost women in a workforce? What will help? And so we built this really complicated model to try and assess across all these different countries, what are the policies that might make a difference? And in particular for today, we were really struck that it was paternity leave. Paternity leave came out very clear front and center as a key policy to drive female participation, to drive women in the workforce. And not only that, but it came at no cost to male participation. So we looked at both sides. So not only is it a positive from the kind of perspective of female participation and women in the workforce, it doesn't have to cost men anything. And if anything, hopefully, as we'll come across later on, particularly I'm interested to hear Jonathan's point of view, the benefits that can come for men as well as for women of having more equal, as close to equal as you can get when it comes to paternity leave relative to maternity leave.
Thank you. So it's so interesting that you found that encouraging the take-up of paternity leave had no detrimental impact on men and positively supported women as well. That, and that's absolutely, as we're going to highlight now, why some of our recommendations have come out as key as the ones we're really focusing on in the Working Families Best Practice Guide. So thank you, Stephanie. Claire, can I come to you now? I'd be really interested to hear about what we know as a work stream, because we've done research on the sort of current practices of member firms, and then a little about the Best Practice Guide and the key recommendations within it.
Sure, thank you. So the survey that the Working Families Workstream carried out last August on maternity and paternity leave policies showed that 12 member firms are currently offering enhanced paternity and maternity leave of 26 weeks at full pay. That seems to be the kind of benchmark as it stands today, with one firm exceeding that. But then at the lower end of the scale, we've got around 48 member firms still offering 2 weeks paternity. That's the statutory 2 weeks paternity leave. So this shows that support is still mixed and heavily focused on mothers and maternity leave. And where paternity leave has been extended, there's often unequal treatment between genders.
Yeah.
So moving on to the aim of the guide, we want to increase awareness and understanding of the challenges and barriers that working families experience, and to highlight potential solutions that organisations can implement. We also want to provide guidance to firms to help them make a cultural shift on work-life integration that accommodates working families' personal responsibilities whilst continuing to support their career development, as we've said, and also to identify best practice recommendations for supporting working families within member organisations. So the 5 gold standard or recommendations that we have, I'll read these, I'll say these to you, and I'll say why we picked these. So the first one is enhanced parental leave of 6 months at full pay for all, regardless of gender or route to parenthood. Then we've got public disclosure of policies and benefits focused on working families, and that's both parents and carers. Then we would like firms to set clear targets for the take-up of parental leave policies, with external reporting of the tracked performance versus the targets. Without tracking, we don't know where we are and whether anyone's taking up these policies. And then training for all line managers on supporting working families. And then finally, and really importantly, creating a robust, sustainable, smart working culture through the adoption of the Diversity Project's Smart Working Manifesto, where parents and carers feel confident to ask for and take family leave, and that flexible working is a right from day one within an organisation. The reason we've chosen these to highlight, there are lots of different ways in which organisations can support working families, and we have highlighted these in the guide and encourage members to look at all of them. However, the 5 I've just highlighted are those we believe start to make the most significant difference to working families and impact them the most positively.
Thank you, Claire. And absolutely, as you've said, and I know that Stephanie, in your research, I think this is highlight that supporting individuals to take advantage of the policies that are in place is really crucial, that people feel they have permission to do that. And so that monitoring of the take-up, that third point, is really relevant in terms of we can have the best policies in place, but if individuals feel that they can't avail themselves of them for whatever reasons, then they won't get used. And I know that's been highlighted. Stephanie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so a really interesting case of this, which I think really exemplifies what you're talking about, is actually one of the most generous countries in the world for paternity leave is Japan and South Korea. They're both very generous. But men don't take the leave that they're entitled to because there's a cultural kind of pressure not to take it. And I think that's, for us, actually, we drew that out. And when we took Japan and South Korea out of our model, the results changed because there is such a strong cultural pull to, and within companies, we know that can exist as well. Just within a company, you create your own culture. We're always talking about that concept of company culture. So it really is, you can see how you can have all the leave in the world, but if you don't feel comfortable take it and supported by your manager and by your HR managers, then it's really difficult to kind of really build that genuine equality. And in some ways, it's good for men to be asking the same questions that women have been asking for quite a long time. How will taking parental leave affect my career? Those are questions women have been asking for decades. But now having men as part of that conversation is just so much more powerful, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Stephanie. And what a good intro into an organisation that has done a lot of work to encourage, well, looking at the length of their parental leave, but also doing work to really encourage the take-up of it. So, Nikki, can I come to you? It would be really interesting to hear about your experience at Fidelity International and what you've done to support working families in your organisation.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So at Fidelity, we are committed to achieving greater gender balance and parity across all our business locations and regions. And in the past, we had good maternity and adoption leave packages where we went beyond local legislation. However, we recognise that to be a truly gender balanced company, we needed to ensure policies and procedures were inclusive of all genders, regardless of sexual orientation. And that's why in 2020, we introduced enhanced parental leave, or EPL as we call it, which equalised paid time off entitlements for fathers and secondary carers with our paid maternity leave entitlements across our 27 operating locations.
Unmuting myself would be useful at that point. So how did you go about, because I mean, linking back to Helena's point at the beginning about investment and this not being seen as a cost, but often there's a challenge around how do we build the business case for what can seem like a considerable investment. How did you go about doing that at Fidelity?
We are fortunate at Fidelity of having very supportive leaderships who are fully embracing D&I. And for us, the business case, and I'm sure for this group, is obvious, as it would enable all our people to spend time caring for their children and thrive in their careers, and to encourage a gender neutral approach to recruitment and career progression. And so whilst we did have some concerns from some managers, once we'd explained that this is already in place for some, so through maternity or adoption leave, it's in place for some of our colleagues, that it will continue to develop a more family-friendly culture, also level the playing field for parents, and ultimately increase a gender balance, leaders were supportive and on board for the conversation. And the approach that we took meant that leave can be taken over a longer period of time, but within that 12-month period after the birth or placement of the child. And we also enabled the leave to be taken in 2 instalments rather than just one block leave. And this means that new parents can take a few weeks after the arrival of their child, but also take the rest of the EPL at a later date to stagger with their partner if they so wish.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know I do some work in Denmark with How Do You Do It, and that's exactly the pattern they have there around the leave in terms of that split pattern. So how did you actually go about implementing it and telling people that this wonderful new support and was there, and how was it received?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we shared the benefit through an internal article initially as a global piece, so everyone got the same information at the same time. We also had an all-staff email from our Chief People Officer, and we updated our HR hub, which is like a Google for HR matters. And our comms approach was very much focused on role models. So people from different regions, different levels, and how parental leave, so like we'll hear from Jonathan later, how parental leave has benefited them and their loved ones as well. We also used video content and Yammer posts from our role models and our champions to raise that awareness and the benefits, and also the company's commitment to gender balance. And as part of our approach, we encourage colleagues to request the leave at the earliest opportunity, but with a minimum of 8 weeks notification. And we also encourage people managers to take the same approach to resourcing and backfilling as they would do for maternity leave. And externally, we also shared a press release to advertise this offering and updated our external facing D&I web pages to showcase Fidelity as a family-friendly and an inclusive employer. And in terms of a timeline, so we had the internal comms in the June of 2020, and the policy came into effect in the September. And you asked about sort of the impact and the results from that. Yeah. We have had colleagues have been delighted by this offering, and the uptake was instant. So since the launch, we have had almost 300 people booking enhanced parental leave across all our regions, all levels of seniority and business areas. And also commenting on what Stephanie was saying, it's also been welcomed from our female colleagues and our gender balance network. We found that some male colleagues were initially hesitant about taking this type of leave in case it would affect their career progression, which ultimately has given them more insight and empathy into the experience of women in the companies or organisations when taking maternity leave. And in these cases, managers and HR BPs have encouraged and also reassured these colleagues to take full advantage of this benefit. We also found as a positive outcome from EPL introduction through our employee engagement surveys, scores had increased with colleagues saying that Fidelity was more modern and a progressive workforce. And we actively support our colleagues to share their stories of parental leave within either internal campaigns through International Men's Day, or we had one, Julian Hay, I'd suggest having a read. One of our LGBT leaders shared his story, which went viral, I think earlier this year, which was brilliant to hear.
And the lovely thing about that, Nikki, and one a challenge that I sometimes hear in the clients we work with is where individuals don't see role models, or they look up, and maybe they're even thinking of having a family, but they look up and think, oh gosh, is this going to be possible here? Then you can leave, there's a retention risk at that point in terms of, so really demonstrating to those individuals who are on their journey to having a family, but also to others coming through, that what is possible is so important. So as an organizer, it sounds like you've done an awful lot already, and a lot to promote it both internally and externally, which again is one of our recommendations in the Working Families Guide. What are your plans for what's coming next? Because I know this is an ongoing journey for many organisations.
It is, and one point that we have from the guide as well is, whilst we do track the uptake of enhanced parental leave, later in the year we aim to go further to analyse the data to understand better the impacts and assist removing any of those barriers for expecting parents, but also those returning back to the workplace after their leave. And this timeline is a bit longer so that we can allow people to return back in and see that benefit rather than doing it too soon. So that's one piece we're looking forward to seeing, as well as continue those role model stories. I think it needs to be a continued conversation, and for different levels of seniority in different areas, taking it to really showcase and role model that. And also it's worth mentioning that at Fidelity last year, we introduced 5 days family care leave for each employee globally each year. So we introduced this following feedback from our colleagues during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and our colleagues were telling us how their caring responsibilities had increased, whether they're parents or not. And from this, we took the approach of introducing this 5 days paid leave, and it's almost a third of our employees have taken this up in some way. It makes it easier for people to be able to balance their work and their caring responsibilities. So we're really proud of that piece too.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And gosh, you've highlighted something so important there. I mean, certainly during COVID, in the groups that I work with from a parents and carers point of view, we're hearing an increase of care responsibilities during that time. And so really thinking, and the guide does highlight, we're looking at working families very broadly, and it highlights ideas that can apply for both parents and those with caring responsibilities in the workplace. So thank you for highlighting that. Well, what a brilliant story from Fidelity International in terms of hearing all of the good work they've been doing in supporting working families. But I'd love to hear from another organisation as well. So Dimple, can I hear your experience in terms of what you've been doing at GIC?
Sure. So the principles of our DE&I framework is to put into practice workforce diversity, inclusive culture, as well as enabling employees. So there's a number of key actions that we've taken over the years that are linked to the guide that I'd like to go through. So first of all, similar to Fidelity, we have extended paternity leave at full pay. And the take up for that is actually very good. And most fathers have taken that up within the office. And also we match company maternity pay to shared parental pay as well. It was one of those situations where the government enhanced those provisions, which was great from a leave perspective. Female employees were able to curtail their maternity leave and transfer it to their partner, but there was really no incentive for parents to take that up because they knew that the pay was going to be significantly different.
Yeah.
Most organizations in our industry do enhance maternity pay. So for us, it was just a no-brainer. There was no real debate or discussion. We implemented it pretty quickly, and it's been successful from our perspective. Of course, every organization can do more and we can promote it more, but the take-up has been good, and our employees are role modeling for others to take that as well. So we're really pleased about that. And we're so proud as well, because it's just such a good thing to do. Then also what we do is provide a confidential support program to those that are going off on long-term leave, like shared parental leave or maternity leave. And that allows them to plan ahead and also alleviate some of the apprehension that they may feel before, during and after. And that's something that we're quite proud about as well. Parental gifts. Now, I see that that's in the guide. We've always had parental gifts in place, but more recently we've partnered up with From Babies with Love. And it's a social enterprise, and 100% of their profits go to orphanages around the world. So it's a very, what's the right word? It's a very positive step towards thinking about sustainability, I suppose, in everything we do. So we actually do all gifting for employees from Babies with Love, so promotional gifts, anniversary gifts. We do everything with them, and the experience has been great. And the feedback has been very good as well. We have the ability for staff to buy annual leave, take carers leave to deal with any caring issues to do with any dependent, not necessarily your children. And we have caregivers leave, which is to help with the caring needs of anyone who's critically ill within your family or dependent. That's something that's very important to us, because we can imagine how much stress and pressure that would create on an employee who's almost forced to have to come into work when there are so many things to look after in their family life. We've partnered with Educating Matters in the past, and we have a great relationship with them. So more prior to COVID, because we could have a lot more information sessions, but we partner with Rachel, who comes into the office, has done in the past, to talk about the different stages of parenting, because it is a minefield. I'm a parent myself, and you think you've overcome one stage in parenting, and then comes another. So we brought her in to talk about, how we can better handle, for example, preparation for nursery, preparation for GCSEs, A-levels, university, and that's been very well received. We're actually currently planning for these information sessions to take place again. In general, what we've been doing a lot more recently is just normalizing conversations around different stages of life. Of course, parenting, being a parent is one of those, but also issues around menopause. For example, we had a lady come in, Lauren Sheeran, more recently to talk about menopause, for example. What we then do is think about how can we then change policy, change guidelines around those topics. And then we also try and embed the insights and the learning by HR sessions as well as line manager sessions as well. So they're the sorts of things that we're doing. I'm sure there's more, but I was thinking about how can I link it to the guide.
Yeah, thank you, Dimple. It's such a great range. And you say something that's really relevant, isn't it, around normalizing discussions around this. And I know in all the work that we do with parents and carers, and this work since I've been doing for 10 years now, but as an organization since 2006. And the biggest single thing, the biggest piece of feedback we initially get, aside from other areas, is especially when we're doing working groups, is I know I'm not alone, that other people are experiencing this too. So the more you can, as you did at Fidelity, sharing stories and experiences of role models and normalizing some of those discussions that around how we navigate work and life and family, then it really can be, knowing that can make a big difference to individuals. Thank you, Dimple. That's, it's been lovely to hear from two organisations about the work that they've done in terms of thinking about the support they put in for working families, and also demonstrating the range of different types of support that can really make a difference to, ultimately retraining, attracting and enabling people. But now I'd really like to hear from an individual who's experienced extended parental leave. So Jonathan, coming to you, I'd really like to hear about, tell us about your experience and what worked well in terms of the leave that you took.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I had a little boy, first child in June of 2020. So beginning was the pandemic, which and then lockdowns and everything. So he was born in lockdown. So interesting time and a busy time for us in many ways. And then I took my extended paternity leave of 3 months. So my little boy was born June. I took it from about mid-December onwards, and everything about it went well. The leave during the leave itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I expected, I was really looking forward to it. I expected everything to go well with that. I had an amazing time with my son, and feel very, very grateful now and at the time to have had that amount of time with him. Also went fine from a company perspective. I have a team of 3 who look after our clients, sort of around 40 clients. And we each planned for that time. We had a lot of support from HR. HR were brilliant. A lot of support from management around, and they, right from the beginning, were super, super positive and supportive about it. Were really, encouraging me to take it. And having the conversations with me around how we get supported, and adding a little bit of support for my team as well to help for that period. And we just planned, and notified all of the clients, and sort of planned with the clients and planned with my team that I would be off for that time.
Mm-hmm.
So client-wise, and kind of keeping the client experience and the client service up at the right sort of level was fine. And then from my family's perspective, I suppose my little boy wouldn't have known any different if I'd have had 2 weeks off or 3 months off. Hopefully he enjoyed the fact that it was 3 months. But I know my wife absolutely loved having that time, as I did as well, having that period of time, all 3 of us, and to have that as a family. So the leave itself, everything went well about it, and a big part of that was how well I was supported at work and how positive they were about it. But what's been really interesting for me, and I kind of expected all of that. I expected to enjoy it. I expected my wife to enjoy it. I knew before I was going off, I was sort of comfortable that work was going to be fine. But what's been really interesting for me has been sort of what's happened after I've taken it. I'd love to say that I was sort of altruistically, taking it to, being an example to other people taking it, as I think I was the second person in Julius Baer to take it. But I was really pleased and really flattered that afterwards, I had a lot of people, come to me who were, then becoming fathers, or even people who the couple weren't even pregnant yet, but were thinking about it, saying, it was really great to see you taking it. That would make me feel far more comfortable to take it in future, and then wanting to have a chat about it. That was great. But for me personally, it's also really changed my view on just the balance of kind of what's okay in the balance of prioritizing work and family. 5 years ago, I would have done exactly what sort of everyone else, exactly what most dads in the office do. You might see your kids sort of first thing in the morning for a little bit, and then a few times a week you'll try and rush home and get home for bath time. But really it's, the mum's kind of doing all of the compromising and has sort of all the challenges around, getting home in time to take over from childcare or whatever it is. But I really feel differently about that. And I think a big part of it is that change in the paternity leave from, the mum takes a year, the dad just takes a tiny bit of time just to, help and, take the 2 weeks, and then you're right back into work. And it's a cultural change. You can see, and the paternity leave is a part of it. It's a cultural change as well that's happened, that sort of everyone in the office is slowly sort of realizing that it's becoming more normal, for dads to be leaving the office at 4:30 because, and saying, I'm leaving at 4:30 today because, I'm going to, pick up my son from, nursery or whatever it is. And then being more flexible around that. So that sort of longer term effect, has been really interesting for me.
That's really interesting. So that extended leave was a chance to really think about how I want integration of work and family to be beyond this point, like what I expect how I need it to run for me and my family. And it sounds like, what's lovely about what you've highlighted is it sounds like it's worked for the organization. I mean, in communicating in advance, did you get any tricky reactions, or was it all about just good planning and good communication? How did you sort of handle that bit with clients in advance?
Yeah, and that was all I think a few clients were surprised because their generation. Most of my clients are older than I am. So for I think that generation, it certainly wasn't what they were used to. And when they were working, they certainly weren't taking that amount of time off. So I think a few people were surprised. I think partly because it's something they hadn't come across, that they didn't know any companies were offering that. But after kind of getting over that initial surprise with people and kind of talking it through and explaining sort of why I was taking it, and most importantly, talking through sort of what the plan was for, making sure that there wasn't going to be any gap in the service for them. And I did. I worked. I stayed. Basically, I assured everyone that anything really material, anything really important for them, the day-to-day was going to get sort of covered through the team, and they'd be speaking to me a little bit less and to others a little bit more. But anything really big that was going on for them, any big decisions that were happening or bigger life events or anything like that, I would absolutely be involved. So I think that was a really important thing to share with everyone. And I suppose it's a little bit different when you've got somebody client facing sort of taking that time off. Because across sort of circa 40 clients in any 3-month period, 5 or 6 of them are going to have something pretty important happening, and something where if I wasn't involved at all, they'd be thinking, it's not ideal. So, but again, it was all about planning for that. We thought it through so well. And HR, raised a lot of questions. Said, look, how are you thinking about dealing with this? How are you thinking about dealing with this? Management did the same thing. So because we planned so well for it, and which I think was quite amazing, given it was the first time someone client facing had taken it, and only the second person in the firm taking it as well. Second man in the firm taking it. Which I think is such an interesting point as well, is that you've now got, and so someone raised this earlier, you've got men thinking about taking the paternity leave and thinking, gosh, how am I going to go about this? And how's it going to work before I go and after I go? And then it sort of, then it dawns on us, gosh, women have been dealing with this and having to make these compromises and, having these worries and concerns for, decades. So if I'm a little bit concerned about it, a little bit concerned about taking 3 months, how have women been feeling taking the leave, and for multiple children, and then having the sort of societal norm that whenever there's a situation between mother and father and both of them work, and someone needs to compromise, to make a pickup or to do something, it's sort of it's just sort of known that it will be the mum that does it. So I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing for men across, men in the workforce, to start having a better understanding as well of the situation that women have been in, and will continue to be in to an extent, as this hopefully balances out. Gives us a much better awareness, I think.
And with hindsight, looking back, it sounds like it's been such a positive experience. But is there anything you would change? Anything you'd do differently?
I think the only thing I would change, so I took the, again, it's an interesting one then, thinking about how it's affected people and how people have gone about taking maternity leave and taking the sort of 6 months or 12 months. For me, it was going from, 2 weeks as a long holiday and a long break away from work and the day to day. I got to sort of a month and a half in, and I really felt like I'd been off for a long time. And perhaps it was because I was still having the link to work, the link to clients and link to work. So I hadn't kind of, completely handed things over. But I would split it, if I was doing it again, I would split it into smaller parts, which was an option that I could have taken. It sort of just didn't dawn on me that, that would work better. But if I was doing it again, I would perhaps do 1 month, come back for a bit, 1 month. And I know, not everyone would have the flexibility or the opportunity to do that, but sort of in a client-facing role, I would have sort of split it out, so I could sort of, I think it worked absolutely fine as it was, and being over Christmas helped as well. But I think that would work even better for me if I was going back and doing it again, which hopefully I will be.
And what would you say, so there's learning there for you for next time, and what would you say to others that are considering taking it, who are, maybe not sure? What would you say to them?
Yeah, take it would be the first thing
Yeah.
that I would say, and then share sort of all the benefits that we've been talking about. I was very, very fortunate that in our industry, people in the client-facing role, if you have a good set and book of clients, that puts you in quite a privileged position of career safety. So there wasn't a point, when I was planning for being off and talking to clients and talking to people internally, it wasn't one of my concerns that taking the time off would impact my success at work or my future at work. So I think I'm very, very fortunate in that respect. And then speaking to other people sort of from other teams and departments, you can see, and again, it's interesting, isn't it? Thinking, a man, working in, let's say, in compliance, a man thinking of taking 3 months off, worrying about whether that's going to hurt his future career prospects. And you think, what about people taking 6 months, 12 months off? And I think it's just going to have to be the cultural, and it's great that this is, that started to happen. And I think the pandemic has sped things up around how people feel about the balance of work and home, but also the physical balance of being in work and being at home, which helps so much. But to answer the question, I would really try and encourage the person to take it. And if someone was really nervous about taking the full 3 months, I think it's a great thing. And it's Julius Baer's policy, and I don't know if it's sort of written into how other people's are as well, to be able to do it, to have some flexibility around how you take it. So it's not just look, you have to plan to take a 3 month or a 6 month chunk. We have to plan it and, have somebody else filling that time. To be able to do it in parts. So someone who was a little bit nervous about taking it perhaps could take 4 weeks, see how they got on, and see, I don't know, just sort of see how that felt. And then perhaps, have the flexibility to take another 4 weeks later, whether that's in the first year or the first 2 years of that parenthood, I'm not sure. But to sort of at least get it started. And I think the fact that people in all departments across our bank have now been taking it over the last 18 months, 2 years since I took it. I think there's examples everywhere now, and really senior examples, which is key, because if you see somebody more senior than you in the same department taking it, that's a clear green light that that it's okay for you to take it as well.
Yeah. So take it, and if you feel funny about taking all of it, do half of it, and then maybe that experience of that half will make a difference to how you feel about the remainder you've got left.
Yeah.
Stephanie, did you want to add to that? I know.
Well, he's just said it there at the end, but that, I think Jonathan's story is so powerful because you are in a position where you have a team, that you are in a relatively senior position, and I think that senior individuals modeling best practice in terms of that culture point we made earlier is so important, and is identified in loads of the literature around this. It's very clear that the more people feel that they can see the future for them in their senior management, the stronger your talent pipeline can be longer term, because they can see a path because you've modeled it. So it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, and the one other thing I would say around that sort of examples and messaging kind of from senior people and from the top is that I think it's so important, which we had in our firm when the policy gets launched for, and it should be the CEO or, maybe it's chief people officer or head of HR, that it's announced alongside all of the benefits of it. So explaining what the benefits are for the person, benefits for the firm, but for the family. But also, and I think a really, really important thing is for the culture. So I think men as a whole think that the culture around gender balance is pretty much fine, that it's come a long way, that culture's pretty much okay, because all the policies and the processes that we can see around kind of equal hiring and promotion, women have all the same, opportunities as men do now. So I think a big flaw in the workplace is that men broadly think everything's okay. But once you start hearing more experiences from women and what it's been like for women in the workplace, this situation where when men start thinking about the paternity leave, that's the first time that they really understand the challenges that women have had and the things that women have had to think about and the worries that women have had. I just think there's so many things like that. And, I'm part of the Male Allies group of the Diversity Project as well. it's such a this gap in the culture and this flaw in the culture where men broadly think everything's okay and there isn't much more to do. I think there's that flaw. I think a lot of the focus has been on supporting women over the years, but the culture still isn't anywhere near right. And the gap there is men just need to know so much more about, about so many more things. We're shockingly, once you start kind of being told these things and getting an awareness of them, and men generally in the workplace are shockingly unaware of what it's like to be a woman in the workplace. And these sorts of changes are the sorts of things are going to bring that awareness in.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's very true. Linked to that, I worked with a father recently who was going to take 2 weeks paternity leave. The reason I met him is because he decided to take extended, and the only reason he decided to take extended was his line manager asked him if he was going to. So, and it's that line manager not just asking the question, which is why we say support for line managers is important, not just asking that question of a woman in terms of her intention around length of leave, but asking the fathers as well. And that starts to make a shift, because that question gave him permission to think, oh, that is something that applies to me too. So yeah, it can make such a difference. So thank you. What, brilliant experience to share, and to look at how that's also changed. You talking about it allows other people to think differently about it as well. So coming back to the guide, because we've highlighted that throughout our conversation today, Claire, what is our request of member firms? What would we like them to do?
Well, we have a few requests. The first one is obviously for firms to review the guide and the recommendations. We'd like them to consider the support that they currently have in place for working families and how they can align those to the recommendations. If required, put an action plan into place to move towards these goals. And it's important to note that these are 5-year goals. So we recognise that member firms are starting from different places and may need to take steps to move towards the targets rather than, implementing all at once. And then lastly, we would welcome case studies that show examples of good practice across our member firms that we can continue to share across member firms.
Thank you. So it's review the guide, share experiences, recognise this is a 5-year. So, we do understand that members will be at different points on their journeys around the support they offer for working families. And there might be steps to move towards what we were recommending. But yes, and continue to share the really good practice with all of us. So as we come towards the final few minutes of our time together, I'd like to come to you all as panelists to say, if you had one wish for supporting working families, or if you could encourage members to maybe take a first step, what would that be? So Nikki, can I come to you first? What would be your wish for supporting working families?
I think my big wish would be that the governments would subsidise childcare for young children more, to increase that balance for parents, but from a company level, look at what you're doing and how maybe you can either take this first step or continue your journey.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, childcare is one we haven't touched on today, but it's certainly a significant cost for many families and impacting the decisions that they're making around leave and afterwards. Dimple, can I come to you? What about you? What would be your wish?
So I think it's really important for all organisations to be open and recognise that this is a journey. We just cannot do everything overnight, but being intentional about creating a supportive and inclusive environment for everyone is just very, very important. And as you do this, staff will become more open to sharing with you and sharing ideas. A lot of what we do is actually from staff feedback. So we're currently exploring backup care for dependents. We're launching fertility, adoption and maternity care support as well. And a lot of that has come from research, but also employee feedback. But we need to create that environment to begin with. And then finally, consider the different cultures that exist within your workplace when looking at parenting, because different cultures parent differently and look at parenthood differently. So I think it's important for managers as well as HR teams to learn and be open about the differences that exist in the workplace.
Thank you, Dimple. Thank you. So starting the conversations, as you said, and having intentions around it. Thank you. Stephanie, can I come to you?
Sure, yeah. I think it's really off of a lot of what Jonathan said. I think it's about, for me, the wish is just not to let ourselves be limited by what we personally experience. And I actually think Jonathan's an outlier in terms of the experience. What I mean is, there are lots of, as was mentioned, lots of senior people in finance who took, men who took 2 weeks or less, 2 days in some cases, that don't expect that things would shift. And I think when we're setting policy, we need to step back from our own experience and indeed our very limited view of kind of gender and the roles that we all play. To me, gender equality will exist, and we don't talk about women being superwomen. They don't have to, equality means you don't have to be a superhero, you get to be a person. And equally for men, that they get to be a person as well, and that they get to fully engage with all parts of their lives. So that would be my wish, is just to not be limited, because we have lived in a world where there has been this idea that women take a lot of maternity leave and then they take, they do the childcare and men don't. Let's not let ourselves be limited by those personal experience, because Jonathan is a good example of how actually breaking free of those kind of existing biases we have can really open your eyes that, oh, there are other ways to do things.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Jonathan.
I think my wish, following on from Stephanie's point there, very, very similar, is that the awareness of men in the workforce is massively increased. Through examples from senior management, from talks from senior management about saying how important this is. This is the remaining flaw. This is the remaining barrier in the culture, I believe. Is that men are still, we're obviously, we're a big proportion of the workforce, but also disproportionately in some of the more powerful roles in the workforce. It's the male perspective and the male awareness that needs to change for this culture to move. Of course, women are more than aware of all of the challenges and aware of all of this, and how things need to move and the direction things needs to move in. I think there's a lot of men who, if they're just given the awareness and the knowledge, will be very, very supportive. And I just think that the gap is the knowledge and awareness. Everyone I speak to, where you start sort of raising these things, the conversation, the response is always, gosh, I really wasn't aware of that. Yeah. Because I'm now aware of that, I'll change my behavior, and I would like other things to change as well. So it's really awareness piece. So that would be my wish, a raising in the level of awareness of my fellow men.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, and having conversations, it's so important to doing that. Claire, can I ask you?
So many asks. My one ask would be for all member firms to look at offering enhanced paternity leave beyond the statutory 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you. And as Jonathan's highlighted, the difference that can make to everybody's experience and understanding in the workplace around the support for working families is so crucial. So yeah, thank you, Claire. Helena, can I come to you and also possibly a close after the your wish?
So I would wish, and it's actually, I think, quite a plausible one, for member firms to see this as the great opportunity to leap towards gender equality. I mean, I've worked 35 years in the industry, and there's sort of people have wrung their hands for a long time about the lack of progress towards particularly more women in fund management roles, but obviously in other roles as well. And obviously we have one of the largest gender pay gaps and so forth, and people have become quite exasperated by that. I think this is the key, if we, going back to the starting point, if this becomes a male and female issue, the whole issue of having families, which is the majority of people, then we will finally be on to something. Having little programs here or there to encourage women to sort of like work out how they make the best of the situation in a man's world is just not the answer. And I think this holds the key. So I would relatedly like, if I can have a sort of follow-up, and that's, for firms to genuinely see their human capital as an asset and not as a cost. And this is the key to actually, instead of looking at obviously you have to cost out how much it will cost to have equal paid parental leave, but actually the companies have done it. And I actually think 12 out of our 90 or so is a great start, but let's make that 90, as Claire asks for, that actually it should be normal to offer this, to reflect, finally the desire and the intent to reach gender equality to enable more women to fulfill their career potential in our industry and to attract and retain the best talent going forward. Would you like to say something before I conclude this, Claire, or shall I just carry on?
Just carry on, just go for it.
Thank you. Well, a huge thanks to all our panelists. I think that was fascinating. I was writing so many notes here, but just this whole concept of making something that has hitherto been radical, be normal, and to bring our industry, not just kicking and screaming in the 21st century, but actually take a leadership role. I mean, this is an area that a lot of sectors haven't conquered yet. Let's take a leapfrog over and actually become leaders in this area. I'm very excited by what I've heard. I particularly, well, actually, to be honest, it was exciting hearing all the stories, the best practice in a number of our firms, but also then Jonathan's story. We need more Jonathans. We need more firms like Fidelity and GIC. Thank you to Claire Black and to Sasha Kalasem for all that you've been doing to get us to this point. And then finally, and obviously thanks to Claire for expert moderating of the panel. But I just want to leave with the final thought. We're going to circulate the guide to everybody after this. We've recorded this conversation because one of the dilemmas around working families is that people can't necessarily attend live. So if you found it helpful, do promote the whole concept, do go back into your organization and take the advice, reach back out to us for help if you need it. And we look forward to taking that 12 companies. It's not the only thing, of course, that will help pave the way towards gender equality and supporting working families, but it will be a very good start if everyone can regard that as the norm to offer equal paid parental leave. So thank you once again for your time and attention this morning. Please check back in on the Diversity Project website for lots of other things that we're up to, and I hope you found it helpful. Last, thank you again to our panelists. Bye now.